Tough times ahead for the country's households and consumers, already reeling from high food and transport costs. This amid the country's stagnant economy, which is forecast to grow at a mere 0.7% this year. A further increase in fuel prices next month, coupled with next year's 4% increase in electricity tariffs and a possible interest rate hike, will add more fiscal burden on consumers. But economists agree that Mboweni will be careful not to add to the load.
I think in terms of the taxes, it depends on the extent to which one, for example, if one were to go the route of subsidies, you have to find the money elsewhere, in which case the risk of higher taxes is there. Certainly in this situation, an increase in VAT would simply add to near-term inflation pressures. It has added a bit over the past year. VAT is a one-off, it eventually falls out the numbers, but it's very difficult for people to cope with in the near term. So if there are revenue shortfalls this year, and the one encouraging aspect at the moment of the budget is that in the year to date, the revenue collection has not been far off where one would have expected it to be. So if there's a shortfall for this year, on current information, that shortfall is not likely to be very big. So that does help a little bit, and might limit the extent to which the government would need to look for new taxes elsewhere.
I think the last thing government wants to do is lift taxes significantly further next year. So they won't announce anything in the medium-term budget. That's not the forum for them to do that. But February next year in main budget, I see all these comments, further VAT rate hike needed, etc., etc. I don't think that's needed. I don't think we need to hurt the economy significantly more. We need to keep on the path of fiscal consolidation. We need to keep on getting the budget deficit lower. But that means we have to cut expenditure or rein in expenditure. I don't think we must do anything significant on the revenue front. That'll hurt consumers too much more.
Economists say the country's borrowing capacity is severely limited, and therefore Mboweni will need to reprioritize government's budget to find new money for the 50 billion rand stimulus package to kickstart growth. Meanwhile, chances for an increase in interest rates are still there, especially if inflation exceeds its targeted rate of 6%.
I think there's a possibility. In my own mind, the way I look at things, it's less than 50% probability. And the reason why I say that, because the current environment, when you and I have less to spend on, because we spend more on petrol, we have less to spend on other things. This is a deflationary environment, a deep deflationary environment. Weak economy, little incomes to spend on other things. So that means the ability of businesses to pass on price increases will be limited. And we've already seen that over the past 2 years. When the rand weakened, it's limited ability to pass on price increases. So once again, this environment is deflationary. I do not foresee inflation going above 6%.
The risk here is that although these price pressures are supply-side shocks, the risk is that the Reserve Bank eventually raises interest rates, especially if it starts to see inflation expectations going up generally in the economy and wage demands going up that are going to push inflation outside its target band in the medium to long term. Then there's a risk that the bank does act, and of course that comes straight back to mortgage payments as well. So to try and take that pressure off the bank, if we through the budget start to implement measures that start to address the government's debt rating, that would be helpful.
President Ramaphosa intends to raise $100 billion in investment over the next 5 years to stimulate the battered economy through massive spending on infrastructure development. Economists at Old Mutual believe if that comes to fruition, together with other policy measures, the country can reach between 3 and 3.5% growth by 2020. Manilisi Tubase, SABC News, Cape Town.